Okay, now then, who remembers the 1986 action drama film Cobra, starring Sylvester Stallone? For those who do remember this film, it generally received negative reviews, with criticism on its excessive violence. But it was a box office success and also has since been considered as a cult classic. It was an okay film. Okay, it wasn't as good as Rambo or the Rocky films, but it was okay. The film follows Lieutenant Marion Cobretti, who investigates a string of violent crimes and also protects a witness targeted by the perpetrators. Cobra also starred Stallone's then-wife Brigitte Nielsen. She was also in Stallone's other films, Rocky IV, and also that brilliant Creed II. I liked that film. An interesting fact about Cobra is that the script written by Stallone was initially lined up for Beverly Hills Cop. He wanted something more serious and more spectacular, which led him being replaced by Eddie Murphy. Oh, that's not good. But he took his revised screenplay ideas with him, and together with some inspiration from a novel called Fair Game by Paula Gosling, they evolved into Cobra. But there you go.
This is where the law stops, and I start. Stallone is a cop called Cobra, the strong arm of the law.
Anyway, Ocean Software released 3 different games based on Sylvester Stallone action movie Cobra. The game was released in 1986 for the Zxspectrum, Commodore 64 and the Amstrad CPC. And by 1990 it received a budget re-release. So for this video today, I wanted to revisit these 3 games and then rate them from best to worst. So let's get started by first of all looking at the Zxspectrum version. So let's get started. So this Green Beret style arcade game follows the plot of the film starring Sylvester Stallone. As Stallone's Cobra character, you must rescue Ingrid Knudsen before the night slasher gets to her. There are 3 levels of gameplay set in a city, the countryside and a factory. All have multiple ledges and platforms to negotiate. Cobra starts without a weapon, but he is tough enough to attack with a precisely timed headbutt. Although I have to say this method of killing is a bit risky, as it will kill Cobra if it's mistimed. Round 1 begins with you surrounded by a load of brickwork platforms and girders. Give it a couple of seconds and the enemies start hunting you down from above, below and all sides. And the slightest touch from any of these goons wielding knives, goons throwing knives and Victorian looking women with bazookas means instant death. And bizarrely, for some reason, there's also a mass of runaway prams, yes you heard me, prams, rolling about all over the place, which will freeze you for a second and that will almost likely mean another death, so be careful. Luckily though, you can headbutt, stab or shoot these like everything else. You've also got to look out to the knives and rockets that have been pre-launched ready for your arrival and are moving up and down through the air. Everywhere, they're everywhere. And also, as well as your headbutt, you've got a duck and a jump, and both are thankfully very responsive. The attack from the duck works well too, and it is essential. In the Zxspectrum version, there are boxing gloves located at the bottom of the screen, which indicate the number of lives the player has, while a duck symbol gradually depletes as the player's weapon wears out. So anyway, let's check out the first level. Now, that level 1 was crazy hard, but with a bit of practice, the first level is pretty beatable, meaning that we leave behind the mostly monochrome grittiness of the city's nighttime streets and head out into the most Zxspectrum countryside you can imagine. There's now a bright blue sky, and the rest is mostly blue too, including the character sprites, which I'm pretty sure contributes to some pretty decent colour clash avoidance, even when there's a massive bodies interfering with the local flora. Apart from that, same enemies, same drill, and actually this one seems a little bit easier to complete after mastering the first level. Now we're on to the last level, the factory. I have to say there are so many enemies and projectiles on the screen, to the point I could hardly see myself. It's like an industrial take on the city level, so a few more chains and conveyor belts, and there's a bit more colour too, but you're just swamped before you have any time to take in any of your surroundings. Eventually the world's smallest and least imitating boss, Night Slasher, appears and charges about in a very convincingly animated angry little man kind of way. The little fella's chucking knives in all directions, and I think the trick here seems to be drop down in front of him from a platform just before he throws the next knife. So take him out with a single headbutt. I do think these headbutts are tricky though, I have to say. Okay, we're on to the Commodore 64 version. First impressions are good, with a really cool loading screen and some lovely haunting title music, and there's even an attract mode. But then it's quickly apparent that this is one of the worst games I've ever played. It's now a regular side-scrolling thing in a generic blocky C64 cityscape where you seem to be spraying some kind of perfume at enemies who are women pushing prams, motorbikes and guys in what look like pyjamas that seem to change colour as they take damage. Although it's very hard to tell if anyone is actually taking damage until they're eventually dead. The collision detection is as baffling as the cast of characters. The movement is floaty, except when you want to jump. And I would say probably the most exciting thing that actually happened is that my legs actually separated from my body, which carried on moving as normal while they remained stationary. Wow. This game really stinks. It's absolute shite. Anyway, let's have a look at the game. Okay, let's have a look at the Amstrad CPC version. The CPC version again unleashes macho cop Marion Cobretti onto the streets to protect fashion model Ingrid from the psychotic night slasher and his army of goons in an 8 side-scrolling levels. All 8 stages actually take place on the same very long game map, only the starting location really differs. In each of the levels, the goal is to meet a kill quota. A certain number of enemies must be taken out to advance automatically to the next stage. Enemies come running along the street, hide in trash cans or shoot from windows, armed with throwing knives, machine guns or rocket launchers. Also present is dive-bombing ducks. Cobra can take a few hits before he loses a life. An extra one is awarded every 10,000 points. At the start, Cobra is unarmed and must punch out the bad guys, but some enemies leave behind hamburgers that when picked up give one of 3 weapon power-ups. Those are a machine gun, a pistol or a throwing knife, each with only limited energy which can be refilled by collecting another hamburger. When you get to level 3, Ingrid will appear and Cobra must follow and protect her. She can't be harmed though at least until level 6 when the night slasher appears. And failing to protect Ingrid means you lose a life. So the CP version is its own game in its own right. And while there's more levels and loads more colour, as well as cars, nightclubs, prostitutes and more of the city to see in general, it controls like crap. Our guy has this floaty jump that would have been ideal for the long jump in Daley Thompson's decathlon, but it's ridiculous here and there's just no heft to anything, even getting stabbed. Okay, it's not as messed up as that Commodore 64 version, that was shite. But at best, it's very, very average at whatever it's trying to do. So for me, I would say stick with the Spectrum version. Well, there you go. That's all 3 games. So, what did I think of them? Well, for a start, I still can't get the taste of that Commodore 64 atrocity out of my mouth. It was absolutely horrendous. But while the Spectrum version can be horrendous in a far more intentional way, I'll always have a soft spot for that game. Okay, it's not quite the masterpiece that is the Spectrum port of Green Berry, which it definitely reminds me of. And it's a movie tie-in the loosest possible sense. Maybe even be more closely related to one of its star's better known movies than it is to Cobra. But I have to say, it is a fun game in its own right for a few minutes every now and then. It's polished, it feels good play, and there's plenty of challenge to keep you going for the best part of 40 years. Maybe Cobra in the Zxspectrum can turn his attention to that crime on the Commodore 64 instead. Such a rubbish game. So, with regards to rating, worst to best, the worst definitely goes to the Commodore 64. Such a stinker. It's a right jobby of a game. I'm going to place the Amstrad second place. It's not the worst, certainly compared to that Commodore 64, but it's also an average version and the controls are just bonkers. So, that means the Zxspectrum is the winner. Well done, Spectrum. Well done. Now remember, this is all just my opinion. My opinion is not necessarily yours, and that's fine, it's only a bit of fun. I hope you liked my video. If you did, then please press that like button. Leave a comment, even if it's a nerdy one. Nerd. Finally, don't forget to subscribe. Until my next video, take care of yourselves. Bye bye.